Today's scripture reading comes from Ecclesiastes 2:17 through 23 and 3:22. So I came to hate life because everything under the sun is so troubling. Everything is meaningless, like chasing the wind. I came to hate all my hard work I came to hate all my hard work here on earth, for I must leave others everything I have earned. And who can tell whether my successors will be wise or foolish? Yet they will control everything I have gained by my skill and hard work under the sun. How meaningless. So I gave up in despair, questioning the value of all my hard work in its world. Some people work wisely with knowledge and skill, then must leave the fruit of their efforts to someone who hasn't worked for it. This too is meaningless, a great tragedy. So what do people get in life for all their hard work and has anxiety? Their days of labor filled with pain and grief, even at their night, their minds cannot rest. This is meaningless. So I saw there is nothing better for people than to be happy in their work. That is our lot in life, and no one can bring us back to see what happens after we die. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
All right. Thank you, Julia. You guys forgot how depressing Ecclesiastes was, didn't you? It's been a while since we were there, but we're going to see, Ecclesiastes is this very earthy vision of things, this very under the sun where things are meaningless. But we're going to talk today about vocation. We're in our series, We Are Sola, kind of talking about who we are, what makes us who we are. We talked about the big story, which we're going to review today. We talked about our mission statement. Why do we exist as a church? There's plenty other churches you can go to. I think all of us drove past several churches on our way here. Why do we exist as a church? We talked about our mission statement, why we believe, we are called to be here in Littleton at this time and place. Last week, Rob talked about how to read the Bible. And it's so important. It's going to work its way into this message as well, because it really is, it has changed a lot about what I believe about church, how I operate as a Christian. Just changing the way I read the Bible has made just a massive difference in my life. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But today our topic is vocation, and the title of the message is A New Way to Be Human, which all you Switchfoot fans are probably like, yeah, right? Love that album. It's a great album. And honestly, if you listen to the album, it's going to kind of follow the narrative arc that we're talking about here. It talks about, it starts out New Way to Be Human. It's very optimistic. And then you get into some songs that are very pessimistic, like Nothing Matters. Does anything matter here? Company car, I'm getting everything I want. I've got the company car, but what have I sacrificed to get it? I have all the wealth that I could want, but what did it cost me? And then eventually comes back around to there's got to be something more, like that Augustine's Confession song, until it ends with some more fullness of meaning. Really great album, A New Way to Be Human. But we at our elder meeting, we didn't get to do an elder retreat last year, which is just super. Just a bummer, all right? Our elder retreats are just a really great time to go away, talk about the church, who we are, where we're going, confess sin to each other, check in on each other, and instead we got together in our sunroom and met for a day. We had Stephen Garber come with us, and he talked a lot about this idea that of vocation, and worked in this. I don't know if he's a Switch fan or not, but he worked in the phrase once you grab hold of the gospel, you're really entering into a new way to be human, okay? And this idea of vocation, we actually have talked about this before. Let me give you our big idea here. And I stole this from a sermon that I preached in 2017. And I think when I preached it then, I stole it from someone else. So honestly, I don't remember who actually wrote this. I don't want to claim it as original. But our vocation is to bear the image of God faithfully by living with God for the good of the world. Our vocation is to bear the image of God faithfully by living with God for the good of the world. When we talk about vocation, a lot of times we narrow it down to simply work or occupation. And I'm actually going to do that today. I know that's a stereotype and I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to today because I only have like 25, 30 minutes. The last time I preached on it, I went like 46 minutes. So you can go back and listen to it, and I'll give you the link because we've talked about this more fully. We've talked about this very broadly. I talked about vocation, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. Jim Mullins actually came and gave a sermon about what is the meaning of work. And so I've put those together. If you want to get a bigger version of this, you can go to sola.church/topics/vocation. And if you have the time and energy, you can go back and listen to those and hear kind of a broader version of vocation where it is all-encompassing, it is holistic. I had this huge graphic that I think was probably a little bit too much. But it talked about vocation encompasses who we are, like what are we good at, what are our skills, what are our passions, where we are, like where do you live right now, who are your neighbors, what we do, and not just like what we do for a living, but what are the different roles that we fill. Like I'm an IT consultant, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I've been a softball coach, I've been, like all of these things are part of my broader vocation, and also what time is it? Like where are we in this period of history, and how do our roles play themselves out? But you can go back and listen to that. For today, because we don't have as much time, I want to talk specifically about work and draw out some ideas about work and occupation and the things that we do. Whether you have a job or not, there is work that you do, and I want to talk about that a little bit today. So, I have, where is it? Do I have it here? I've got it out of order. I want you to go ahead and take out your phones and go to this website, slido.com. Elijah, your mouse is over here. You have to move it way to the left. Way to the left. Keep going. There you go. Slido.com, put this number in, 49252, and Lige, once you're on the page, go ahead and activate the first question for me, please. Does that make sense? All right. The first question, what did you want to do when you were growing up? What did you want to do when you were growing up? If you're not connected there, it's slido.com, 49252. Be a teacher, yeah. What else? Doctor. Like, what did you want to do as an occupation? When people ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Astronaut, nurse, chef, a Disney voice. Ooh, like a voiceover artist. Pediatric nurse, Broadway performer, archaeologist, Ninja Turtle, yes. All of us wanted to be a Ninja Turtle. Where do I get that radioactive slime, right? Astronaut, athlete, second base in Major League Baseball. That's oddly specific, but very cool. Yeah. The dinosaur, yeah. Veterinarian, fireman. Yeah, a lot of common, a soccer player. A lot of these are really common. I thought I wanted to be like a lawyer or a doctor or something, just because those are the stereotypical ones that you're supposed to want when you're a kid. And I ended up as a teacher, which I loved. Paleontologist. Awesome. When we're young, we're like full of idealism about work, right? And we imagine, oh man, if I get into that occupation, like if you're doing what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, right? But we're full of this idealism, and then we actually start to work, and there's a lot of disappointments. For example, Lige, go ahead and go to the second question. How many of you have lost a job recently? How many of you have recently lost a job? Past 6 months, past year, more than 3 years ago? Never. Some of you have never lost a job. You may have left a job, but you maybe have never lost a job. Past 3 years, past year. All right, a lot of us, we got 20-some responses. I'm guessing some of these are kids, too. You've never lost a job, right? You don't know yet. You don't know what it's like yet. More than 3 years ago. Past 6 months, yeah, a fifth of people here have lost a job in the past 6 months. Past 3 years, past year. Yeah, I remember very clearly losing a job in education. And the way, like actually it happened twice. And the ways that it creates those existential crises, right? Where so much of your worth feels tied to your work. And I remember in Massachusetts losing the job there of teaching and coming to Colorado. And in my mind, it's like, I'm never going to be a teacher again. Like, I want nothing to do with education. And like you have those crises of self-worth that happen. All right, last question. For those of you who have like a job, occupation, or something that you do, how would you describe your work in one word? Okay, one word. It might be fulfilling. It might be frustrating. It might be complicated. Sales, yeah, fun, rewarding. Wow, these are optimistic. That's great. Stressful, yes. Helping others. Nothing because I'm a child. That's 4 words, but okay. That's all right. Mandatory. Okay. Like mandatory. Like this is something I have to do, right? This is like, I don't really have much choice here. Puzzling, tired, exhausting, smelly. Okay, smelly. I'm going to guess. Probably know who that one is. Although it could be a mom of a young child too, like, right? Help others. Meetings, yes. Meetings all day, every day. You get on your Zoom calls, right? Heavy. Care provider, that's great. Challenging, rewarding. Wow, fun got the biggest. Wow, interesting. You guys are an optimistic bunch. All right, when we want to talk about work, okay, so we're going to talk about work here. Let me go here. When we think about work, and honestly, when we think about any topic in the Bible, this is where what Rob preached becomes so important. We tend to read the Bible with a mindset of, what are the rules? Or what am I supposed to do? Okay? And this can be really disastrous. I was telling some people last week, I'm part of a Facebook group for pastors of small churches. So it's the Small Church Pastors Facebook group. And it's a mixed bag, honestly. And somebody posted a question about, so it started out, I've got a single mother with 3 kids in my congregation. And in my mind, I think I know where this is going. It's like, oh, he's probably going to ask for money. Like, I would pitch into that. Like, a single mother with 3 kids whose husband, deserted them for his mistress. Okay? It's like, oh, yeah, like, we'll give money to that. But then he went on and he said, I'm wondering, she wants to follow Jesus. Is she supposed to tithe on the child support she gets from her ex-husband? And I almost flipped my table over. We come to the Bible like, what are the rules here? And I went to the comments thinking, man, this guy's going to take a beating. And comment sections anywhere are dumpster fires. And a lot of the comments were, well, the IRS doesn't consider that income and it's not taxable. So, if you were to, follow that, then technically it's not income. And so she doesn't have to tithe on it. And others are like, does she want God to bless that money or not? And I just walked away just kind of sick about that, because we come to the Bible so often with this idea of, what are the rules? What am I supposed to do? Rather than connecting it to this bigger story where our role now is to love God and love our neighbor. And so my response was, I hope the church is actually giving her more money than she's giving the church, right? This is how I hope it would work itself out. But a lot of times when we're thinking about a topic, we take the concordance strategy of Bible study, and it's like, I want to think about work. Let me pull out my Strong's Concordance. Where does the word work appear in the Bible? Or I'm going to Google verses about work. And like all these verses start popping up. And so then I kind of develop my theology around these isolated versions. So some of the verses that pop up when you do that are verses like Colossians 3. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. All right, you're all familiar with this verse. Knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. Right? It's that audience of one approach. Okay, like you're doing it for the Lord. And that's, don't get me wrong, that's good. And we're going to talk about how that it can go bad. But here's our theology of work, right? You're not working for your employer, even though it says master, and it's actually in context of slavery. Slaves, be obedient to your masters. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord, and then it gets a little bit awkward, right? But we come up with the Bible, and like here's one of the verses that comes up. We find, right, this is one you probably, if you played sports in a Christian environment, you probably had a T-shirt with this one. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God, right? And it's like, you're doing everything to God's glory, audience of one, blah, blah, blah. And so here's our understanding of work. You're supposed to do work as if it's to God and not to man, and that's about it, right? And you're supposed to work really hard because God is watching you, and your work should bring God glory. And we walk away, and we kind of miss the whole passage is actually about eating food. And the whole passage is like, is it okay? The Corinthians are concerned about the rules and are asking, is it okay to eat meat that's offered to idols? And Paul is like, guys, the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof. How are you loving your neighbor well? How are you loving your neighbor well with the meat that they're offering to you? If you go to someone's house and they serve you meat, don't ask. Just eat it and love your neighbor well. If they're getting up and telling you, like, this meat's been offered to idols and we're doing this as a form of worship to our God, then don't eat that, because that's how you love your neighbor. But we remove it from the context, and we kind of miss out because we haven't connected it to the big story. So Ecclesiastes, what Julia read for us this morning, is this very earthy vision of work, because it's full of frustration. And then it's also like, well, this is all we got, so we might as well enjoy it, okay? Work is frustrating. It's pointless. You do all this work. You're going to leave it to someone. Who knows what they're going to do with what you leave them? Like, there's parts in Ecclesiastes where your son might be a fool, and you're leaving all of your work and labor and toil to a fool. And then he comes around in chapter 3. I don't know if you saw that. It switched from chapter 2 to chapter 3 there at the end. It's like chapter 2, work is pointless because who knows what's going to happen to all of it. You can't take it with you. To chapter 3, well, I guess we might as well just enjoy the work that we have because that's the best that we can do. Ecclesiastes presents us with that very earthy vision of what work is. But what we want to do is we want to connect it to the big story. So let's just review our big story really quick, okay? And I'm going to zip through this. Down arrow. I'm on eraser. There we go. Down arrow is creation, right? God creates all things. And if you read the creation story, the creation is good, and it's what God intends, but it's not complete because he creates man in order to come and subdue it and control it and to work the land. And work is part of creation. Work is not part of the fall. Right? Man was created to do work. And what happens when we get to the fall is the fall makes work frustrating. He says there's going to be thorns and thistles, and you're actually going to have to labor, and sometimes it's not going to work out. Sometimes you're going to lose crops, right? Sometimes it's just not going to work for you. And now work is frustrating, where it was fulfilling and enjoyable, and Adam could toil, and it was meaningful. Now work is going to be full of frustration, right? It's not that he wasn't working. It's that work is now frustrating. And we understand this. Like, we are created to work. How many of you kiddos have seen the movie WALL-E? You guys seen WALL-E, right? And adults too, you guys have seen WALL-E. And like the robots all have their directives, right? Eve meets WALL-E and she's asking him, directive. And WALL-E shows her like, oh, I take trash and I compact it and then I put it out in a cube. And he asks Eve her directive, and she says, classified. All the robots have directives. All the robots have these purposes that they are built for. But what happened to the humans? They're all sitting in their leisure chairs, getting everything handed to them by the robots. They've got nothing but, leisure, and they sit back and they are entertained. And it's like, if you just described it outside of the movie, it sounds great, right? You sit back, you enjoy, you have leisure, you relax. You don't have any responsibilities, nothing that you're supposed to do. But when you actually see it, there's kind of a visceral response to it. Like, I can't imagine that, like, living that way. And ultimately, they need to get back to the earth where they can till the land and be productive and work, right? So WALL-E is this story of humans having to return to their creative purpose and actually be able to work again. I remember the movie About a Boy with Hugh Grant. And Hugh Grant plays this character who is super wealthy because his dad wrote a Christmas song and he just lives off the royalties now. And he doesn't do anything, right? He plays pool and he watches TV and he tries to seduce women. And then when he finally finds somebody he likes, he realizes he is completely uninteresting because he doesn't do anything, right? And as he's trying to get to know this person, he finds out I'm just a blank. There is nothing interesting about me because I have no purpose. There's no reason for me to be here. And he's able to find his purpose through community. But we see examples like that. Somebody asked him, his character in the movie, what do you do for a living? He's like, nothing. Oh, are you taking a break or something? Oh yeah, you could say that. Okay, well, what did you do before that? Nothing. I've never worked. All right. And people just have this visceral response to that. We were created to work, right? We were created to have some sort of purpose here. And the fall brings in brokenness and frustration to that. And so part of the promise is things going to be restored back to their natural order, back to the way God created them. Jesus comes and he starts this, right? He inaugurates the kingdom where he is now working to set all things back to their creative purposes. And he sends us on that mission, and one day he will fully complete it. When we get to new creation, it is not this, I don't know if you watch The Good Place, where, they get to the good place and it's just hey, Janet, get me an ice cream sundae. Hey, you have no responsibilities, you have no work to do. And in the show, everybody is so bored that their brains turn to mush, okay? That is not a vision of new creation. New creation is a restoration to God's creative purposes, and part of that is work. What are you going to do in new creation? How are you going to subdue the earth and tend to it and increase shalom? We're going to get back to that one day. So the idea is that God is at work through Christ restoring things to the way they should be. And so we are on mission together with him to do that. That means whatever your occupation is part of that, right? Whatever it is you do for a living, whatever it is that occupies 20 to 40 hours of your week, it is connected to Christ's work to restore all things to himself, to restore shalom. And so often we get it disconnected, where it's just, I just need to do the best I can. I need to use it for evangelism, and I'm going to do Bible studies at work, and that's great and all. But how is your work actually contributing to shalom? How is your work part of your mission with Christ to restore all things under himself? And sometimes, honestly, I'm an IT consultant, and sometimes it's hard to make those connections. And sometimes it's not always the work itself that is contributing to shalom. I think the work that I do contributes, I'm helping people communicate effectively with each other. That's a good thing. But it's also what it allows me to do. It allows me to provide for my family. The job that I have now isn't what I want to do forever, but it allows me to be a better father than I could be otherwise. It allows me to do foster parenting. It allows me to be a pastor, right? It opens up these opportunities. And so often we end up getting it backwards. We end up getting it broken. We have these crises. Some of you have lost jobs recently. Some of you have seen dreams die during. I've talked to several people who, they have these plans, and all of a sudden this pandemic starts, and it's everything is just upended, right? And so it's easy to feel that loss of self-worth. But if your occupation is a portion of your greater mission, it's easier to see you haven't lost your purpose just because you lost your job, right? So man was created to work. The fall makes work difficult, but God is at work through Christ restoring things to the way they should be, and we are together with him on that mission. So I've got a few questions for you to ask about the work that you do. Let me find them here. There we go. 1, how do you co-create with God through the work that you do? What does it look like for you? And if we had more time, we'd pass the mic around. And I can't wait till we get back to our normal routines where we can do that a little bit more, right? How do you co-create with God through the work that you do? How does the work that you do contribute to Shalom? How is it an avenue for you to be creative, right? God created us in his image, and one of those things is creativity. How does your work reflect that? How do you co-create with God through the work that you do? I should say these questions are not original to me. I took them from a book about work by Skye Jethani and another author. If you're curious, it's a really short book. You could read it in about an hour. Where do you experience the fall and brokenness in your week? Where do you experience the fall and brokenness in your work? Right? You're co-creating with God. You are working at contributing to Shalom. Where does the fall and brokenness come into play and make it frustrating? Where do you find those points of frustration in your work? All right? We all do. Even those of you that said your work was fun, I would wager it's not always fun, right? Where do you experience restoration and redemption through the work you do? One of the questions they ask, and I forgot to write it down, but it was, what is the redemptive goal of your work? What is the redemptive goal of the work that you do? Where do you experience restoration and redemption through the work that you do? Do you just give in to the frustration? Do you just accept it? And in some cases, you might be powerless to change it, but at least you can reflect on the fact that this is part of the fall, and one day Jesus will restore all things to himself. But there are some frustrations at your work that you can actually be involved in the restoration and redemption of it, right? There are people that you work with who are struggling, who don't know Jesus, who are separated from community, right? We can experience restoration and redemption through the work that we do. And last, how do you sense that your work is part of God's greater work? For some of us, this is easier. It's easier to connect. I am contributing to Shalom here in a very obvious way, right? One of my kids does stocking at Walmart, all right? If you like going to a store that has things on their shelf, she is contributing to Shalom on your behalf, right? And it's easy to connect that. We've got some waste management employees here, right? Have you ever been in a position where your trash wasn't picked up for a while? Do you understand what happens there? Something happened. We used to be with another company. We switched to waste management. But something happened with billing and auto pay. I honestly don't know what happened, but we went 3 weeks without our trash being picked up. We are a family of 8. It was disastrous, all right? It's easy to see how those employees contribute to Shalom, because as soon as they stop doing it, everything starts to break down, right? How do you sense that your work is part of God's greater work. So this is how we connect our work to the true story. Why do we struggle to believe this? Why do we struggle so much with work? And the reality is work is just often frustrating. So often either the work that we do is frustrating. It might be that there's other, honestly, I feel this a lot because I want to get back to teaching. And I know that this is just not the time for it, right? And there's that frustration. But the second way we struggle to believe this, and this gets back to how we read the Bible, right? We had those verses about, do it unto God, audience of one, do it to God's glory. We view God, those verses come across as a threat to us. We view God as this angry taskmaster. I need to go and do my best work because God is watching. What do you mean by that? Are you worried that God is going to be disappointed with the work that you do? Are you going to work with the mindset of an audience of one, but you mean by that God is watching, I better not screw up? We have taken some of these verses and we've twisted our view of God. I understand this because so often we as parents reflect this instead of a loving father who is joyfully watching his children. If you're a manager or if you're a boss, often we reflect that view. We are teaching people to think of God that way because we are acting as angry taskmasters who are disappointed with our workers. And we go to work, we think about, I need to do this to the glory of God, but it's actually not joy as a motivator, it's fear. What do you think's going to happen? You think God, is God going to be mad at you? Is God sitting there like the Far Side comic with his finger on the smite button, just waiting? He's not doing good work. He's slacking off. I'm going to push the smite button here. I'm going to make his life just a little bit worse because he's not bringing me glory in the work that he does. Think he's going to love you less? Sometimes we feel that way, right? I view God as this angry taskmaster. So how is Jesus the hero of this? Jesus redeems our work. He allows us to participate in the renewal of all things through our work. Work is frustrating, yes, sometimes, often maybe for you. But you get to partner with Jesus in his restoration of all things. And if you can connect your work to that, now you're not looking for purpose and meaning from your work itself. Your work is an avenue towards your real true purpose and meaning. Okay? Jesus redeems our work and allows us to participate in the renewal of all things through our work. And second, God is not an angry taskmaster. When it says God, do it as to the Lord and not to men, God watches our work as a joyful father. And if you are a parent, I hope that you understand this. I remember, and I'm going to use my kids as examples here, and I hope they don't mind. I remember watching Sophia play softball and acting as pitcher, and she took a line drive to the gut, picked up the ball, and threw the runner out at first, right? Just absolute joy. I remember Ari doing marching band. I felt bad that she was hurt, don't get me wrong. But that she made the you understand that yes, that brings me joy as a father. I remember watching Ari do marching band, especially at our freshman year at the state tournament. I had to go to the bathroom because I was crying. I had seen her just accomplish so much and overcome so much that I was just so full of joy I couldn't contain it. Watching Ella play volleyball, and we couldn't be there because of coronavirus, so I'm watching online, and she just nails 5 straight serves, aces, bam, bam, bam. The 6th one, she gets it over, but then her teammate screws up on the return, right? Just watching that with joy. Well, Summer, you guys have seen her artwork. We had some people over, and we're just showing off, Summer, you need to go get your iPad and show people your artwork. Wow, look at what she's able to create. I remember Lige playing football, and it's flag football, and he gets the handoff, and he's blocked it, he's got nowhere to go, and so he just pushes the truck button and runs the kid over and gets the first down. It was amazing. Technically, you're allowed to do that. But you understand, like, even when they mess up, you're just so full of pride. I remember Aubrey, we took her swimming yesterday. She finally got it on her own, and she's swimming to me just by herself with no floaties. This is your Father. Your Father is not watching you, waiting for you to mess up. He is just so enamored with the work that you're doing. Like, look at the creativity. Look at what they're doing. And even when my kids mess up, it's not this massive disappointment. It is like, it's okay. We're here for the long run. I can see the person that you're becoming, and we're going to get there. Your Father's not disappointed with you. Your Father is not angry with you. Like, the work that you do, you are free. You're free to fail. You're free to be creative. You're like, he is just excited for you. Don't ever believe that he is standing there waiting with his button with his finger on the smite button. He loves you. So we come to the end. Our tradition is to go into communion. And this is another one of the ways that we read the Bible wrong, and we see God as waiting to judge us, because 1 Corinthians 11 talks about the Lord's table. And it says something kind of scary. And I remember this being hammered home growing up every time we took communion, right? If you take it unworthily, what's going to happen? Some are sick, some have died, right? And so examine yourselves and make sure. And there are times where it's like, oh, I don't know if I should take this. But I also don't want to skip it, because then everybody will think that I have, And so there's just this massive shame on both sides of it. And we erect these barriers to communion, all right? If you haven't been baptized, you can't take communion. Why is that? Why do we do that? In our minds, it's like, well, you're not really following God if you haven't been baptized, and so then, you can't examine yourselves and come away clean. Let me just say this. The context for that is Paul talking about the rich coming to the table and leaving full, and the poor going away hungry. And this is a reversal of what Mary proclaimed as the gospel, that the poor will come away full and the rich would leave empty-handed. And so when Paul sees this, he's not worried about you, like, having some sin that you haven't quite confessed yet. He's saying you are using the Lord's table as class warfare. Like, you are using the Lord's table as a way to show how rich you are and how poor they are, and to separate yourselves. If you're doing that, don't take it. If you're going to use this bread and this cup as a way to demonstrate like how great you are and how horrible somebody else is, yeah, quit taking it. But if you are coming to this bread and this, little chintzy prefab, I can't wait till we get back to normal. If you're coming to it saying, like, you know what, I'm struggling and I need Jesus, man, take all that you want. If somebody comes up and says, I don't know what's going on, I just know that I need help, let me start here. Taste this bread. Taste this juice. This is Jesus. He loves you, and he sacrificed himself for you. It is a demonstration of the love and affection that our Father has for us, that we get to celebrate communion every week. And don't come to it thinking like, I don't know if I'm good enough for it. Do you believe that you need Jesus? Yeah, take it. Enjoy it. Relish it. Let's say our call to communion, and then we'll continue.